And welcome to another episode of Total Football Talk. I'm Anthony.
And I am in Chicago where tears are drowning our sorrows. I'm Eric.
Yeah, well, Eric, we already covered the Bears 0-1 start, but
It's still going on.
um, the Rams they went 1-0. They won a game, kind of the way you kind of called it. You said it was going to be a 3-point game. Um, I'd have to go back and look. I don't know if I said this on the show or if I said it at my brother's when I was watching it. But I said that I wouldn't be surprised if the Rams won that game by 3 points, only if their offensive line couldn't protect Jared Goff. And Havenstein early on did not look particularly great as they were getting pressure on Jay Goff. But Goff, despite the pressure, I think played very well. We'll jump into the Ram game since I'm on that. So, Eric, you for all purposes, I'm going to give you credit here. You said the Rams would win by 3. You said it would be a closer game. I felt like they would not lose by 3. I thought the Rams had a chance to kind of win by 10. And most of the game they were up, by 10 points or whatever. But you could just tell that Carolina's McCaffrey took over that game at about the 7.5 minute mark of the fourth quarter. The last 2 times Carolina touched the ball, they put it in the end zone, and the Rams missed a field goal at one point, and that's when I started to get a little bit nervous. It should have been 33 to 20 at that point, and instead it was 30. It was 30 to 20. But by and large, I felt like Well, I'll let you go first since you're the one that kind of predicted it. Go ahead.
Yeah, what I felt like when I said it was going to be a 3 point game. Actually, I guess what I could say was I thought that it may have been more of like a close game throughout the whole game, and it was just more indicative of the way it just fell in the fourth quarter. And I mean, a win is a win. Don't get me wrong, but it wasn't as close as the final score indicated.
Yeah.
Now, yeah, when you miss a field goal and instead of winning by 3, they hit if Zerline hits that field goal, they win by 6, and we're not talking about who called it or who didn't. I mean, that's beyond the point, really. But what I really liked was getting both Malcolm Brown and Todd Gurley in the mix for rushing. And Gurley did come on in the second half, is where he got majority of his 90-plus yards. I think he missed 100 by 3 or 4 yards.
Yeah.
But Malcolm Brown had 2 pretty close score touchdowns. And Goff spread the ball around, and that's what you have to do when you have Cooks, Woods, and Kupp on your team. And eventually, every now and then get Higbee or Everett a ball here and there. But you spread the ball around, nobody's going to have the greatest day. And it's week 1, too, remember. So a lot of these guys are still playing. You're going from barely playing at all in the preseason and practicing a lot to playing a full game. And that's where it's going to wear and tear on you a little bit toward the end of the second half. And while the Rams defense kept McCaffrey in check for about a half of the game, yes, he did run wild. You could tell the Rams were tired, but they were still playing from behind, and that's the one place that the Rams had to focus on, and they kind of let their guard down a little bit. Now, what I also checked was the box score. Man, you would think Aaron Donald wasn't even on the field.
Yeah.
However, it's not what he does in the box score, but you have to watch the film, and he's disrupting plays. He might not get credit for a tackle or for getting close to the QB if he doesn't get the pressure because he was there maybe 5 feet too late, but he's still disrupting plays, and that's what causes McCaffrey to run to one side or the other.
Yeah.
Cam Newton still needs a lot of work. Like, he looked good. I may or may not touch on the Thursday night game between the Panthers and the Buccaneers, but man, there were 2 different Cam Newtons out there from week 1 to week 2. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was because it was a short week, and because guys, again, preseason, they're not playing much, if at all, and they're coming in and playing 2 games in 4 days. So there's a big difference there. So he looked better than good in week 1. He was below average to bad in week 2, and again. but that's the Panthers for you. They're usually up and down. But the Rams, they came out with a victory on the road, which they needed, which I thought that was big for them to go all the way east. Even though it is week 1, it's still long travel, but it's not week 2 or week 3 or week 17 or anything like that.
Well, once
they
again,
went in there, yeah, they went into Carolina. They took care of business. They had the ground game going. They had the pass game going. They were clicking on 4 out of 5 cylinders, and I say 4 out of 5 because, again, that offensive line needs to gel a lot more for the Rams to be an offensive juggernaut that they have been in the last 2-3 years. Or the last 2 years, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the Rams, once again, they travel more than any other team in the NFL except for Oakland. And once again, New England and Pittsburgh, all they have to do is get on a bus and drive to all of their road games. It's absolutely infuriating that the NFL continues to set New England, Pittsburgh, Seattle, these elite teams up with, such an easy schedule. And it does make a difference if Carolina has to go to Seattle and Tampa Bay has to go to Seattle, and then all Carolina has to do is go to New Orleans and to Atlanta. It's not as much of a travel. It's one of those things that I sit back and I just laugh at because it's a subtle thing.
Okay, you say that, but what happened last year when the Rams played the AFC West? They still didn't travel that much.
No, they didn't. But my point is, every time the Rams have the South or the East, they are traveling as far as humanly possible for the road games, and the closer road games, they're home.
Okay, so I have a solution.
Stop playing in London.
Stay in the West and go back to St. Louis.
Yeah, right? No, the solution is quit agreeing to friggin' London games. That would be a good start. And quit having 7 home games every damn year. We got lucky last year that there was a fire in a situation with the field that they were able to play in LA. But not a fire, but there was a fire in LA. The
turf.
The turf issue. Otherwise, they would have had 7 road games again last year. Traveling unnecessarily to Mexico City, where people are trying to flee in great regularity, and we're trying to play a football game there. But I digress. Look, as far as the game goes, I like that you said they clicked on 4 of 5 cylinders. I actually think the O-line played better than I expected. Because you're right, they did dominate that game most of the way. It was either a 10 or a 13-point lead throughout the whole game. They had a chance to extend it to 13 again at the end, and they didn't. But they kept a 10-point lead pretty much consistent. I thought Noteboom and Allen played really, really well in their first starts in live action against that defense, which is a pretty good defense. I was impressed. Havenstein continues to be a concern. I have visions of Khalil Mack hitting Jared Goff on every play, dancing in my head when those two teams play. I don't like the footwork of Havenstein. I don't like the laziness of Havenstein, and I don't like the fact that he falls for the double move almost every time. And in another couple of weeks, someone's going to figure that out. Now, New Orleans comes to town. They put some pressure on Deshaun Watson and Houston, but the Texans' offensive line I don't think is as good as the Rams, although you don't know. Because, again, the Rams have that. Basically, they got 2 rookies playing and a weak right tackle, sorry. But I think by and large, the line did play better than I expected. Todd Gurley, I think we put to bed all of the rumors of him being hurt or having any issues. He looked like Todd Gurley. Now, how long is he going to look like Todd Gurley? Time will tell. But he looked like Todd Gurley today, this past week. Malcolm Brown is got to play a big part in getting the Rams through New Orleans and through some of these tougher games. Some idiot in your fantasy league paid $19 for the guy. I mean, I hope he produces. Some moron. You must have just shaken your head when I did that.
Well, actually, I really wasn't surprised, to be honest with you.
Why wouldn't you be, right? Yeah, I won't be surprised when you pick up the Lions D this weekend. Look, so the reality is for me, it was a win that the Rams should have won. I knew Carolina wasn't as good as people were making them out to be. I knew Cam Newton isn't as good of a quarterback as people were trying to build him up to be ever since his MVP year. And now finally, some people are like, look, outside of that MVP year, Cam Newton's never been a very good quarterback, which I think is funny because I don't agree with that sentiment either. I just think Cam Newton is an average quarterback. I think if you protect him, he can throw the ball deep and he's a good dual threat. I love these guys that go through these extremes where like he's the greatest quarterback since Joe Montana and Tom Brady, and then he starts to struggle and it's, oh, he's never been a good quarterback. Well, which is it? It's somewhere in between, right? Cam Newton is an average QB. Like I said, you can win with him, but you got to build talent around him. But isn't that the case with every quarterback? I mean, it's one of those things. We can get into something like that maybe later in the year as we progress. But I think Jared Goff played very sloppy. I felt like at times he was pressing the ball to Cooper Kupp, and Tyler Higbee was open. Now, he did throw to more to Higbee this week than he has in week one of any other season, so that was promising. Tyler Higbee was targeted 5 times. He caught, I think, 2 or 3 passes and a touchdown. So Tyler Higbee usually doesn't get 3 targets in the first 3 weeks of the season, so let alone 5. So that was kind of nice. But I do think that Jared needs to utilize the entire field. He can't just focus on his 3 receivers. He can't just focus on the running game. He's got to realize you've got a big play, multifaceted, talented tight end in Tyler Higbee and a guy with really good hands in Gerald Everett and utilize him. Now, he uses them when he's a player down, and it's like he kind of goes through this elevation of receivers are here, running backs are here, running backs are here, but if I lose a running back, this tight end goes here. Like, just play the game. That's what I need Jared to do, especially this week, is just play the game. The Rams played about what I expected. If you take the blocked field goal away, or blocked extra point away, I'm sorry, let me try it the right way. I just went through everything that could be except what it was. The blocked punt, you take that away, that's 7 points Carolina never scores. So, take 7 points off the board, the Rams win by 10, right? So the game went kind of the way I expected with a few unexpected twists. The block punt, 2 block punts. The first one was blocked. It just traveled forward, not backward. The Rams got some cleaning up to do, but very positive first game on the road, West Coast to East Coast. It's not an easy trip. And I think Malcolm Brown is going to play, is shown he's going to play a bigger role in the Rams offense. And I'm glad to see the tight end is getting utilized more, but I need to see it more than 1 week. So overall, from a Rams fan perspective, I give him 3 stars out of 5. And we'll see what happens here in week 2. Another game I'm fully expecting the Rams to win. So we'll cover that one in a minute. Eric, let's cover Jacksonville, Kansas City, one of the games you wanted to cover.
Yeah, I, throughout the game, thought it would be close, and I actually want to see this game played at full health. Unfortunately, that can't be done.
Yep.
Bad break, no pun intended, for Nick Foles, who broke his clavicle on a touchdown pass, I believe, as well. However, when I saw that and heard that, I'm scrolling through Twitter, and Nick Foles down, he left the game. In comes Gardner Minshew, the former Washington State quarterback. I'm like, oh man, like, who knows what this guy's going to do? Yeah, he just goes 22 of 25 for 283 or 293 yards. And it's like, whoa, like, Jacksonville, geez, where was this guy hiding? Maybe you could have just drafted him and not given Foles all that money. I don't know. But we'll see what happens. It's week 1. It tells me 50-50. Gardner Minshew, does he belong? We'll find out. We'll find out moving forward if he keeps Jacksonville afloat. I'm also 50-50, the Chiefs defense. Like, are they still as bad as last year? I mean, I know they went from Bob Sutton to Steve Spagnuolo, but I want to see some improvement from the Chiefs D if they have a legit shot at winning the Super Bowl. Because if the Chiefs D is going to play like that all year, like they played against Jacksonville, man, they ain't got no shot against New England. I'll tell you that right now.
No, they don't. And look, when you look at it, you have to be honest with yourself here. You lose D Ford, you lose Houston, you lose Barry. Okay, Spagnuolo didn't inherit last year's Chief defense, which I think he could have led to a Super Bowl. So I think, to Spagnuolo's credit, having, Tyrann Mathieu at safety instead of Barry and putting as much pressure on Jacksonville as they did, I think is a testament of what Spagnuolo can do. Now, who knows what's going to happen through the course of the season as these guys gel and mesh and guys get picked up. Maybe there'll be a trade, maybe not. But I'm with you. I watched this game and I walked away utterly unimpressed with Kansas City. And I walked away scratching my head about Jacksonville. So I went into this game thinking I had answers, and I left this game with more questions than answers. So, with Kansas City, I don't know. I mean, Mahomes played well enough. The running game looked good enough. But what are we really talking about right now?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about the Chiefs offense because it looked really good. I know Patrick Mahomes left briefly with a sprained ankle. They didn't consider it serious. I'd like to see the Chiefs run game get a little bit more involved. I know LaShawn McCoy, he outrushed Damian Williams, but Damian Williams was more featured in the passing game, which I think the Chiefs need to also still get the run game going, which is great. Sammy Watkins, I texted you. I was like, darn, look at those stats. Like, after, quarter and a half, he had 151 yards receiving and two touchdowns. He got a third one in the second half.
Well, and Tyreek Hill
all my life.
Tyreek Hill got injured. So
yeah, Tyreek Hill, he also had, I forget the actual name, but it's when the clavicle actually, moves forward and could actually, break some blood vessels or maybe even get close to piercing your heart, and they rushed him to the hospital, but he's okay. They're calling it pretty much week to week for him.
I was worried. I was worried it might have been a broken arm.
Yeah, it was. They were all wondering if it was broken arm or broken clavicle, collarbone type of thing.
Eric, think about what I just said.
What, you thought it was a broken arm?
Yeah. What about his son?
Oh, shut up.
Everyone out there is like, oh, he missed it. He totally missed it.
Too early in the morning.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's true.
But Watkins has to step up, and Nicole Hardman's got to step up too. But, I think that they can survive the loss of Hill for a few weeks.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, easily. But I'm looking more like, how does this look for Jacksonville going forward? They didn't really get Fournette going at all in the game. They need to get Fournette. They need to ride Fournette. But, man, holy cow. Chris Conley, where did you come from?
Yeah.
DJ Chalk, where did you come from? You guys were, nowhere near being talked about at all throughout the offseason or even in the preseason because everything was about Dede Westbrook and Marquise Lee coming back. But, man, if they can get 4 wide receivers going like that and get 2, in the action, and it doesn't matter any 2, but – get those guys all going and make sure hitting those guys and not acting like a rookie, which, he'll probably regress to, which we all expect.
Yeah.
But, I mean, maybe he can keep Jacksonville afloat. I don't expect him to lead them to a division title, but I think that he can keep them in contention.
Well, and we'll see how that division looks. I mean, I don't know if Tennessee is the strongest team in that division. Maybe they are, but I don't know. I don't know. I think that I will say this. I heard Kurt Warner today say that Winston is a better quarterback than Mariota, and I just laughed and went, "Wow, we're to this point now." Okay. Kurt Warner.
Honestly, I don't think you can compare the two because they've both been downright disastrous.
Yeah, but I would argue if you just look at wins, and if you look at coaching. And if you look at talent around them, Mariota's done more with less, and he's done a better job. And I think Kurt Warner needs to retire from broadcasting because if you're going to make the statement that Jameis Winston, especially after his week 1 performance. Okay? And I know he was improved in week 2, but not by much. You're going to sit there and tell me Mariota, who's done it year in and year out. See, Mariota's not a bad quarterback. Mariota's just, he's an average quarterback. Everyone expects a quarterback taken in the first round to be Joe Montana and Tom Brady. Tom Brady wasn't even taken in the first round. You don't get those quarterbacks but once in a generation. But they want everybody to be great right away because it's important for their product, right? So they don't care. They don't focus on that. And then when a guy doesn't reach these ridiculous proportional expectations, then they're a bust and they're garbage. And you got to decide between the two. So you end up going with, in case of Kurt Warner, the guy Kurt Warner felt like was the better quarterback draft day, rather than just saying, you know what, I was wrong. They double down on their stupidity and they go, I was right. It's Winston. Like, I'm done. I can't watch the NFL Network. I haven't watched the NFL Network. I won't watch the NFL Network. And Kurt Warner, in my opinion, is no different than Rich Eisen, than Willie McGinnis, or any of these other blowhards that don't have a degree in broadcasting. They don't know the first thing about journalism, and all they are is a bunch of opinionated douche canoes that don't know what the hell they're talking about. So I'm kind of done with it. NFL Network ceased to be a good network when Marshall Faulk left the company. So it is what it is. But anyway, let's go. I'm with you, though. I think Jacksonville probably fans can be a little more excited about this game, about this team moving forward than maybe they were going into week 1. If you were to tell them week 1 you're going to lose your starting quarterback for the season, I think they would be pretty down and out. But I think after seeing this kid play, maybe their optimism's up. We'll see what they do the next week. Next up, I want to cover is the Bengals and Bengals and Seahawks. We covered this game. Eric, you said it was going to be a blowout. I knew it wasn't going to be. I think Seattle is every bit as bad. They got lucky. If you didn't watch the game, I'll tell you what happened. With 10 seconds left, Andy Dalton's driving them up the field. He throws the ball forward as he gets hit. It's clearly the arm going forward. It's clearly an incomplete pass. They keep, and it hits the ground with about 6 seconds left, and they keep the clock ticking, and Seattle's scrambling around like it's a fumble recovery. The Bengals are looking around like, you guys are stupid. It's obviously incomplete. None of the Bengals go for the ball. They end up calling it a fumble. They go to replay. It clearly was an incomplete pass, and they concluded that it was a fumble. I would have been interested to see with 6 seconds left if they could have made another 10-yard completion, which takes between 4 and 5 seconds. 6 if you don't get out of bounds right away, and see what they could have done either with a Hail Mary or a long field goal, because they had already burned Seattle on a Hail Mary at the end of the first half to John Ross. So we didn't get that opportunity. Seattle gets the victory because the officials clearly bet on the Seahawks to win outright, rather than going with the spread, because that's the only explanation I have for something so obvious. I mean, even Tom Brady was watching this game going, damn, that was a forward pass. Even Raider fans were watching that going, man, they got hosed worse than we did. Good thing it wasn't a playoff game, right? I mean, it was one of, even Saint fans who were still crying, by the way, and filing lawsuits were like, that's another bad call, and went into an epileptic shock and got triggered and went, penalty! Ah! And just started losing their minds. It was that bad. It was that bad.
So let me get this straight. The refs are for the Seahawks and against the Saints.
Yeah, I guess.
Got it.
I guess. Look, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying this was such an obvious blown call. The fact that it went to replay and they still ruled the same way makes you scratch your head, right? Makes you wonder, because these are supposed to be professional officials, right? It's not like it was a judgment call, bang, bang, don't know what to do. I mean, the motion of the arm, it was past his head. The wrist had snapped as he got hit. I mean, the guy's arm had come across and grazed air, but it looked like he grazed ball. It was so obvious. from 3 different angles, it was obvious. Only one angle could you make a case of maybe he hit the ball. But then the other 3 angles, you're like, oh no, he whiffed on the ball. He didn't even touch it. So like, I don't know. I don't know what else to think. I mean, I know gambling happens with officials. We saw that in basketball, right? And with the NFL going to Vegas, if you don't think they bet, we know they play fantasy, and some of these FanDuel fantasy leagues, right? You get an extra 2 points for a turnover for your defense. That could be the difference between $1,000, $100, $1 million, depending on what pool you're in, right? So let's not pretend like this couldn't be a factor, right? And the fact that they ruled it a fumble and concluded it to be a fumble when it should have been an incomplete pass, that would have been less points for Seattle and another opportunity for Cincinnati. But I'm not going to mar a great game and my point with this last play. I'm just saying, do I think Seattle would have won the game anyway? Yes. I'm about 95% sure Seattle would have won the game anyway, which makes that call so unnecessary. But by and large, I told you that the Bengals were a better team than people thought. I think their O-line played well, considering it was their first game. I think their running game without Mixon is non-existent, and I think Andy Dalton carried that team, as did John Ross, across the finish line despite not having a running game. I knew Jadeveon Clowney was going to be difficult against the run, but I also knew Seattle's secondary was a gosh darn joke. I knew their linebackers were pathetic at best, and I knew that their offense was anything but, an NFL caliber offense. And all of that came into fruition. But at the end of the day, Russell Wilson is a great quarterback, certainly an above average to very good quarterback. He knows how to get the ball to his weapons, and the lack of a running game really hurt Cincinnati. So I knew it wasn't going to be a blowout. I did expect the Bengals to win, and I expect the Bengals to win a close one. I had mentioned that when we talked, but as it turned out, the Bengals don't get the dub. Seattle does. Give them credit. They won the game. They did what they needed to do to win the game. But I think the Bengals walk out of this thing as the most impressive 0-1 team in the league right now. And if anybody wants to say the Bengals are garbage after this game, then they need to reevaluate their opinion on Seattle. And they need to get their head examined, because the Bengals played, considering that offensive line is all new players, I think they played really, really well. Not as good as they could. Again, Mixon was non-existent, which was disappointing, because I think that would have been the difference in the game. But my take was it was going to be a close game. Everyone said I was crazy. I got a buddy to win $100 because he bet on the spread in that game and called me and thanked me later. So you're welcome. Anyway, your take, Eric. Mister, it's going to be a blowout.
The Bengals think the Seahawks are great. I'm going for a CAT scan right now. No, we could sit here and bang the drum all day about it. I just think that Seattle could have won by more had they utilized their weapons better. And I'm saying that because Tyler Lockett did not get targeted until the fourth quarter. Like, I'm sorry, if he's your number one wide receiver, and I know on most teams he wouldn't be a number one. He'd be a 2 or a slot receiver, which is fine. I mean, he's still a decent wide receiver in the National Football League, but you cannot be targeting your best wide receiver, who's not a rookie, twice, both in the fourth quarter. Like, what are you doing? I know you want to run the ball because you don't have the offensive weapons that you once had, and I get it. And Cincinnati, I honestly thought they were going to pull it out. So kudos on the it's going to be a close game on that prediction right there. But, the Bengals, I'm not holding my head down for that game. Zach Taylor had a great game plan going in. Yeah, he lost Mixon, and maybe with Mixon they could have won, but with Clowney on the defensive front seven, he was going to stop the ground game anyways if they ran to his side. So who knows if Mixon would have been going? He wasn't actually running well in the game already as it was.
Right.
So yeah, so Dalton had to utilize his weapons. Uzuma, Eifert, Ross, Boyd, even the other guy who's taking snaps for AJ Green. I forget his name. at the moment, but I think it's a good step in the right direction for Cincinnati, and especially with their game coming up against the 49ers. You know, I expect them to win that game.
Yeah.
They can take everything positive out of the game against Seattle, and even though they're 0-1, they can be like, listen, we might be the best 0-1 team right now, along with the Houston Texans.
Yeah.
The way they lost was crazy.
Yeah,
but
it was.
They can, they can stake that claim and say, we're the best 0-1 team. I know that doesn't translate into wins, but we can learn a lot. We can get right back on the same page. We're expecting Mixon to come back, and we're gonna play some darn good Cincinnati Bengal football, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
And there's a new voice in the locker room, and Zach Taylor is. You could tell in the first game that it's resonating. Okay. Even though they lost their rookie offensive lineman for the year in training camp, they still have a decent enough offensive line to give Dalton time to throw the ball downfield. He's got a speedster in Ross. He's got Boyd who can hit over the middle at any time. They're just waiting for AJ Green to come back. Now he shed his walking boot and he was on a treadmill or something at practice. Like, he wasn't practicing, but he was there at practice. Which was big for Cincinnati, because once they get him back, that offense could be dangerous.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And I want to touch on something here. The Browns in 86, granted, they had expectations going in, but I had expectations for Cincinnati going in. The Browns going into 86, they lost to the Bears in week 1, and they ended up going 12-4. The next year, they lost week 1 at New Orleans, right? Browns were on the road both week 1s at Chicago and at New Orleans in 87. And they ended up with a number 2 seed in the AFC. So, I'm not saying Cincinnati's going to be the number 2 seed by any stretch of the imagination, but you can lose week 1 in an impressive way and walk away going, hey, we're better than we think. I mean, they played the defending world champs in Chicago, and they only lost by, I think, 10. I think it was like 41-31, or maybe it was 41-30. Maybe it was like 41-28. I can't remember. I'd have to go back and look, but either way, the Browns they were in that game most of the way, and everyone expected the doors to get blown off of them. So they weren't. They put up a lot of points on that Chicago defense, and people were like, hey, maybe the Browns are for real. The next year, it was the opposite. They lost to the Saints, and they're like, wow, you lost to the Saints? I mean, New Orleans has never made the playoffs. They're not a very good football team. That year, New Orleans went 12-3, and the Browns went 10-5. So, it depends. Week 1, it really does depend on how your team performs in a defeat, whether or not your season's over or not. And I think in this case, I think they can definitely hang their heads high. The 49ers in 87, they lost week 1 to Pittsburgh. They ended up winning, just about the rest of their games down the stretch, but one. I think they lost to Green Bay in Green Bay in 87 and ended up going 13-2. So, it really does depend how you evaluate your loss and what you take out of it. Again, I go to the 86 Browns because I think the Bengals went in on my end with some expectations, played a team that everyone seems to be pretty high on the road, and damn near walked out of there with a W, right? So I think there's a lot to be positive, and the Bengals are going to be explosive once they get all their weapons back. I would have liked to see them utilize Mixon more in the passing game. Just me. Back out of the backfield, I think, exploit those linebackers because they were pathetic, and they are pathetic, and you can gash them all day long. But that being said, they're pathetic when they have to cover somebody like a Dalvin Cook or a Joe Mixon. If they've got to cover somebody like a Giovanni Bernard, now that's more up to their speed, right? So we'll see how things unfold down in Seattle and Cincinnati moving forward. Okay, to week 2. Let's not cover the Bears yet. Let's not cover the Rams yet. Let's end on those. Eric, what game do you want to talk about specifically for week 2 that the fans should be on the lookout for?
Week 2, Sunday night, Philadelphia at Atlanta. Philadelphia did a great job coming back, being down big against Washington at home in week 1. And Atlanta seriously looked like they were a college football team going up against an NFL football team in week 1. But that's why they play 16 games in 17 weeks. Atlanta's home and Philadelphia's on the road. I'm expecting a lot of points in this game. The Eagles lost Malik Jackson to a Lisfranc injury, so that's a big blow on their defensive line. And while they're not going to be able to get a lot of pressure on Matt Ryan, I'm expecting Matt Ryan to carve up the Philadelphia secondary.
Yep.
Julio's coming off a game in which he was very underutilized. Sanu is coming off a game in which he really wasn't catching the majority of his passes until the fourth quarter. Calvin Ridley, scored a touchdown in the game against Minnesota, and he's going to be a really good slot option for the Falcons. And then you got Hooper. I think they're going to rely more on the passing game now more than ever.
Yeah.
In Atlanta, they're still going to give Devonta Freeman his looks, but I mean the way he ran last week against Minnesota, and I know it's Minnesota. Minnesota usually has a really good run defense. But coughing up the football doesn't really give you mighty guarantees. And Ito Smith looked good running the ball when he was in there. Yeah. So I'm not saying there's a changing of the guard with the Atlanta rushing offense. I'm just saying they're going to be a little bit more skeptical, and they're going to rely on Matt Ryan, the former NFL MVP. With that being said, I'm still looking for the Philadelphia Eagles offense to click outside of Wentz and Deshaun Jackson. And I thought it was bad defensive coverage by Washington to let Deshaun Jackson beat you not once but twice for a 50-plus yard touchdown catch and run. I thought it was pathetic. I thought Washington's defense could have performed a lot better in that situation, knowing, hey, maybe we should keep a guy back. Andy Collins, I'm calling you out. Where were you? Exactly. Nowhere to be found. Anyways.
As a Redskin fan, I just have one thing to say, okay? What's a defense?
Yeah, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm actually expecting some fireworks in this game, and I'm saying Atlanta wins this game 41-24.
Wow, you're going blowout city, huh?
Yep.
Look, as far as I go with this game, I went into this season not expecting much out of Minnesota. Everyone week one that I was listening to, whether it be on the phone or on the computer or, on YouTube through the course of the week, everyone's like, Minnesota wins the division. Minnesota's making the playoffs. Minnesota's good. Minnesota's good. And I'm like, am I missing something? I mean, I know Dalvin Cook is good and I love Cousins, but really? And then I was watching the scores come in from that game, and it was 7-0, 14-0, 17-0, 24-0. I'm like, holy shoot. I had Atlanta making the playoffs. Minnesota's whooping the dog piss out of them. What is going on? So I'm curious if it's very possible I missed on Minnesota. It's happened before, right? It'll happen again. So is Atlanta really that bad? Is Minnesota really that good? It's probably somewhere in between, right? Road game in a hostile environment against a good football team. Things can go south on you, but Atlanta did at least fight at the end. In Philly, that's one of the worst Redskin teams to ever be assembled in my lifetime. And for them to be up 17-0, I think raises more questions about Philly than the Atlanta game. But again, week one is so unpredictable, Eric. And week one is one of those things you're like, is it that Carson Wentz finally got into a rhythm and that's going to be Carson Wentz the rest of the year? Or is it more? We got some answers to that question with Cam Newton on Thursday night based off of his week one performance. That they're going to have to lean on McCaffrey if they want to win any games this year. Like, you're not going to win it with Cam Newton. So what's going on in Philly? Like, we need to see what week two holds. I actually think this game is going to be a lot closer than 41-28. I think Atlanta's got a lot of weapons. I think their secondary has a lot of question marks. I like Philly's passing game better than Atlanta's defensive backs, but I don't like Philly's running game as much as I like Atlanta's front four, front seven to stop the run. So that means it's one-dimensional both ways. I don't know there's going to be 41-28, but you know, man, I mean, it's just so hard to pick this game. It's one of the reasons why I want to pick this one. It's so hard to pick this game. But I mean, for me, Atlanta's home, so I'm actually going to cut their points down by 10. I think Atlanta wins 31-28. I'm going to go with the home team by a field goal. I know that's a cheap way out. But, guys, just so you know, when me and Eric cover games, if we ever pick the home team by 3, it really is a 4-5. You pick them. We have no idea who's going to win the game. It's that even.
Yeah, and I do want to point out, right before Week 1 game, the Falcons re-signed and brought out of retirement Matt Bryant. And apparently they didn't like that Tavecchio kid because he kept missing a little bit too much. But they brought out 42-year-old Matt Bryant back out from retirement. He's now kicking. So, I mean, you know, Atlanta's going to have to get a little closer than normal for field goals these days.
Yeah.
And if they're 45 and in, yeah, you can bank on them getting a field goal. But anything that they need longer than a 45-yarder, man.
I wouldn't go 45. 45-yarder, Eric. That's a 50. What is that? That's a that's a 58. That's a 58-yard field goal.
No, a 45-yard field goal.
Oh, 45. Okay. I would say their target line every game should be the 35-yard line.
Oh, yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
I think that's the you get to the 45, you could comfortably trot out the field goal. You're beyond that or before that, you might need to consider your options. I agree. That's going to be a tough game. It's a great game to pick, though. I mean, they are even. I mean, Atlanta's passing game is every bit as lethal as Philadelphia's. They're both coming off of what I think are disappointing performances for different reasons. Now, obviously, Philly got the dub, so they're happy, but you never know. It's just one of those things, man. We'll have to wait and see.
Right.
So I go 31-28. You go 41-28.
41-24.
Oh, 41-24. Okay. So you're going by more than that. All right. Well, we'll see. Look, if Carson Wentz gets injured, Philadelphia's done. They're absolutely done. And I told you Dallas was going to make the conference championship game. And I'm just saying that right now. I've no reason to think otherwise. After watching Dallas beat up on the New York Giants, who I think is an improved football team. From everything I saw, they look like a very improved football team, if that's a word. I don't feel like that's sounding right coming out of my mouth. They're definitely an improved football team, though. And Dallas still whooped the dog pee out of them, so we'll see how that goes down. All right, the game I want to cover is going to surprise some people. I'm going to cover it for different reasons. I'm going to cover, or I want to talk about, Seattle against Pittsburgh in what I think is going to be a very competitive game, a fun game to watch, and it's going to be a fun game to watch post everything else. Because whoever wins, they're going to be like, oh, they're such a great team. They beat a great Seattle team, or they beat a great Pittsburgh team. And we can all laugh together because these are two bad football teams. Pittsburgh will lose to Seattle at home by the final score of 24-13. I think Connor will not run anywhere against Jadeveon Clowney and the Seattle run defense. I do think Juju Smith-Schuster will get deep and they'll get a few touchdowns. I won't be surprised if there's a missed extra point, so they get 2 touchdowns and a missed extra point. Or if Seattle blocks one, or, they go for 2 because it's Tomlin and they don't get it. Any one of those scenarios could unfold. I think Seattle has enough weapons on offense that they can exploit one of the worst Pittsburgh defenses I've seen since 1988. And I love that people are high on Pittsburgh because it's literally, we're looking at 2 different books, it almost seems like. Like, I'm reading the Bible and people are reading, the book of Satan. Like, I don't understand, like, it's that different. And I know, Eric, you even feel kind of the same way about Pittsburgh as they do. Not saying that, I'm the one reading the Bible and so you're reading the book of Satan. One of us is reading the book of Satan. One of us is reading the Bible. I don't know which one. I guess the end of the year we'll find out. But I just don't see Pittsburgh as a very good football team. They go into New England. They put an absolute stinker on the board against a very average to football team at best. Now with Antonio Brown, they'll be better. Pittsburgh to me looks more worrisome than Seattle. I think Seattle will win this game 24-13. I think they'll be good enough they'll get a field goal. I think Russell Wilson is good for a touchdown on his own, whether it's a run or a ridiculous play where he gets people open downfield. I think Ben Rapeseberger is going to throw at least 2 or 3 picks to a very bad secondary because he doesn't have it anymore. And that Pittsburgh offensive line is going to be the only reason that game is close going into the fourth quarter. So I don't think 24-13 is a blowout. I wouldn't be surprised if it was 24-20. But I see Seattle going into Pittsburgh and winning a very surprisingly clean and neat game. And I don't mean clean because these teams are dirty teams. I mean clean as far as there won't be a lot of penalties. There won't be a lot of turnovers, maybe 3 total. I know I said Roethlisberger throws 3 picks. I didn't mean that. He's probably going to throw 1. Maybe 2. He might fumble, something like that. I could see two turnovers from Pittsburgh, 1 from Seattle, but a relatively clean game for week 2. And I say I'm going to stick with that score. I say Seattle wins at 24-13.
Well, I'm going to agree with you on one thing on here, that I don't think Connor gets the running room that you mentioned that he's not going to get. And I agree with you on that. However, Pittsburgh looks like poop when they go to New England, and that's been proven fact. Tom Brady is 7-0 against the Steelers in Foxborough, averaging really pretty close to those 33 points he put up against Pittsburgh. Listen, Pittsburgh isn't as bad as you're making them out to be, and we're going to see why in week 2. The reason why Pittsburgh looked so bad in Foxborough was Tom Brady, was Philip Dorsett, I'm going to throw Bill Belichick in there for some reason, because Bill Belichick actually decided to take away their number 1 threat on Pittsburgh's offense. And who was that? Juju Smith-Schuster. Then didn't get Vance McDonald involved until the fourth quarter. Sound familiar, Seattle? Sounds like you did that with Tyler Lockett. Pittsburgh's not going up against Bill Belichick. Pittsburgh is going up against Pete Carroll, okay? And Tomlin and the Steelers and Carroll and the Seahawks come nowhere close to Belichick and the Patriots, okay? So in this game, what you're going to see is you're going to see Ben with not as much time in the pocket that he would like. And yes, Connor's not going to run around like he would like he did a lot last year, which means that Roethlisberger is going to be throwing the ball to Vance McDonald, to Smith-Schuster, and he's actually going to get somebody else involved in the passing game, whether that be Moncrief or whether that be James Washington. That's a pick-em right there. However, Seattle will finally decide to target Lockett before the fourth quarter, and that'll come in the first quarter. But I know Pittsburgh's defense isn't great, but all they got to do is say, hey, we would rather have Russell Wilson beat us than Chris Carson beat us, so let's take Chris Carson out. I'm not saying injure him or anything like that, but let's focus on him and take away one of their primary running backs. And that's especially if T.J. Watt is playing in the game. He did leave last week, but I think it was more that their pride was broken than anything else. So, yes, it's going to be, I believe, a close game. I'm going 23-17, Pittsburgh.
Wow. Okay. And guys, breaking news if you didn't catch this. Apparently Tom Brady plays defense for the New England Patriots, because that would explain why Pittsburgh only scored 3 points. Eric, I'm just giving you a hard time, but I will say this.
Well, Tom Brady's offense creates problems.
It does.
For the
It does.
Pittsburgh offense.
It does.
They have to play from behind. They're pretty much already behind from opening snap.
Right.
When New England scored
I'll do respect, Eric. You're right. An offense can really put you in a bind, but the fact that they took away Pittsburgh's best option, which was Juju Smith-Schuster, and all they could muster for the rest of the game was 3 points. I don't ever recall Pittsburgh. If you watch any of the game or listen to any of the commentary afterwards about why Tomlin went for a field goal at that late a time that he did, basically he said, without saying it, that we didn't want to be shut out. Right. And that's the thing. I don't ever recall a time Pittsburgh only put up 3 points against New England under Tomlin.
I don't either.
To me, I think that says more about their offense. And what is with Belichick in the Super Bowl in week 1? He's allowed 6 friggin' points. I mean, again, I don't think one can debate Belichick is one of the greatest of all time. You'll always be able to debate the greatest of all time. Okay? You'll always be able to debate that. Eras are different, rules are different, players are different, drugs are higher nowadays with the steroids and with the recovery drugs than it was back then. Guys in the 50s under George Halas, which would be an argument I would make as the greatest coach of all time, where guys played with broken fingers and broken arms and they just like taped that crap up and went out and hit people. Like, it's different eras you can make that argument. But you can't argue that Belichick is one of the greatest of all time. That he's in that conversation, to be sure. And I can't disagree with anything that you said. The only thing that I would say to Belichick is don't retire after Brady. Keep coaching after Brady and prove that you can do it without somebody named Tom Brady. Part of me was really hoping he would go to New York a few years ago. Yeah, that means the Rams don't go to the Super Bowl, but it would have been nice to see him go where it all began. And I want to see him in New York before he retires. I'm sorry, I do.
I have a question before we move on.
Yeah.
All right. And I just started thinking about this actually the last couple of days, actually. It was said in the broadcast, first, we all know Pittsburgh missed the playoffs last year, going 9-7. The Smith-Schuster fumble in New
Not
Orleans
9-7, 8-7-1, Eric.
8-7-1, sorry, 8-7-1. Smith-Schuster fumble in New Orleans and the loss against the Raiders on the road pretty much doomed them. Either if they win either of those games, they should probably get in. But with that being said, and Pittsburgh not getting to the playoffs, the Patriots don't play a playoff team until the second half of their schedule.
Yeah.
So week 9 and on.
Yeah.
All right. That's crazy, number one. Number two, is it possible if Brown behaves himself, which that still hasn't proven legit yet, and he stays on the team the whole year, are we looking at a 16-0 Patriots team?
Too early to talk about 16-0. Too early. Talk to me at week 10. Week 10 is when I start really taking that talk seriously. Because so many things can happen, right?
Right.
So,
and I know they play the Chiefs late in the year. So I mean that could always derail their hopes, but man, I mean, if this team is an 8-0 after the first half of their season, then something's happened.
Well, like I said, I'm waiting for people to play New England. It's going to be tough to play New England. Like, if I'm playing New England right now, I'm not playing New England the way I talked about playing them in the postseason, right? Because he's fresh. He's had time to rest. By about week 6 or 7, when that arm starts to tire out and that deep ball starts to fade, then you could change up how you're defending them. But right now, we'll wait and see. I think Pittsburgh is that bad. Their offense, I can never recall their offense being so poor. Their defense, yeah, they give up 33 points every time they play Tom Brady, but their defense didn't impress me going in, and you didn't have the bar very high to impress me in this game, and they didn't. So, yeah, I think Seattle's going to go in and beat them. A buddy of mine said, what was his name? I'm trying to remember his name. Might have been my dad, actually. Yeah, it wasn't my buddy. It was my dad. My dad had told me, he's like, you remember 86, right? Because we were talking about Seattle, Pittsburgh. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, you remember when because Pittsburgh, I guess he was telling me that year was picked to win their division or finish second behind Cleveland. And after their 85 season was so bad and everyone was like convinced that Pittsburgh had turned the corner and Mark Malone was really going to help them out. In week 1, they lost 30-0 at Seattle, a team everyone had picked to make the playoffs. And then the Pittsburgh season just went south from there. And he asked me, he's like, what do you think? You think Pittsburgh is, you think it could be 30-0 Seattle? I'm like, well, it's not in Seattle, so no. But I do think Seattle's going to win. So it is interesting how conversations repeat themselves if you watch enough football over the years. Just a little fun fact. I mean, nothing spectacularly unique or different, but I just thought it was an interesting conversation me and my dad had. And then you picked Atlanta and Philadelphia, and that was the game I wanted to cover. But the other game I really wanted to cover was this one. So I'm glad we got to talk about it. All right. Look, Eric, I'm going to go first on this one. Bears in a must-win game. I don't agree with that. There have been more than enough teams in NFL history to go 0-2 and make the playoffs. It almost happens every year now, it seems, right? So for me, this isn't a must-win game. Next week, if they're 0-2, is an absolute must-win game. But 0-2, you can still recover. So what do I think is going to happen? Well, look, it's interesting because both these offenses struggled last week. Oakland's defense is not the Bears' defense. But the Packers' defense is not Denver's defense either. I think this is going to be a very low-scoring game, okay? I'm going to give you a final score here, and I don't want you to get mad at me. I'm saying this because I think it's going to be just a masterpiece. I think Khalil Mack could end up getting 4 sacks in this game, a forced fumble, and a fumble recovery. He may even get a pick in this game. I think Von Miller is going to get himself at least 3 sacks, a forced fumble, and maybe even a touchdown. I think this game is going to be tied 10-10 at the end of regulation. I think Chicago is going to punt the ball away, and I think Joe Flacco and the Broncos are going to find enough answers on that drive to get themselves in range for a long field goal, and I think they're going to win the game 13-10. Now, I say that, again, home team, 3-point advantage. It's another pick'em game. I could easily see Denver losing this game 13-10, 16-10, even in regulation. I just don't think either one of these offenses are going to be putting up a lot of points against these defenses. I think it's going to be a fun game to watch. I'm actually hoping I can catch this game, even though the Rams are playing the Saints at the same time. This is one of those games I wish I had DVR because I would be DVRing both these games. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. But I think at the end of the day, I think Denver, it's not that Denver has more answers on offense or Denver has more answers on defense. But that Mile High Stadium, man, that is a real home field advantage, and it's a really tough place to play. And I think Flacco's arm is going to eventually discover the benefits of playing there. I know that they were in Oakland for week 1, but I think it's going to be Denver in a close one. I'm looking for Chicago to target Allen Robinson more. I'm looking for more quick passes. They need to get the running game involved, which is going to be tough to do against Denver's defense. But I think we need to see quick slants. I think we need to see hitches and goes, to see if we can't get those corners up biting on the hitch, especially after they hit them with the quick slant and the hitch a few times. And they really need to expand on they need to hit the tight end more is really what it boils down to. And in Denver, they've got to utilize the slot receiver more than they're utilizing him at the moment, especially against a team like the Bears with Khalil Mack. I think it's going to be a great game to watch.
Yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of defense in this game. Now, the talk around here in Chicago is, Vic Fangio knows Mitchell Trubisky. Well, which may be true, and I get that. But don't you think that Matt Nagy also knows Vic Fangio's tendencies?
Yeah.
I mean, even though they work together, even though Fangio has been around Trubisky for 2 years, Nagy won, and Nagy around Fangio for a year. I mean, let's not read in too much into he knows his tendencies and blah, blah, blah. Well, that's true until you get your butt blown out.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that the Bears are going to blow out the Broncos. They're calling for seat in the 90s in the Mile High City. So it's not going to be pretty. You're going to see a lot of gas, and you're going to see a lot of winded players too. Yeah. And I'm not saying that just for the Bears. I'm saying that for the Broncos.
For sure.
You know who doesn't play there every year, and it's his first year playing in Denver? Yes, he's played in there before, but so has a lot of other players. But Joe Flacco.
Yep.
Joe Flacco's offensive line looked like a total train wreck against Oakland, and I'm really contemplating my pick on why I picked Denver in that game. But, you had no time. the Bears really need to look over Oakland's offense and say, hey, we can hit these quick routes. You get the ball out in less than 2.5 seconds, Mitch, you're going to find a lot of success because Derek Carr, I almost called him David. Thank you, Anthony. Because Derek Carr, his release was 2.4 seconds before he got the ball out, okay? And he had a lot of success against the Broncos D. Now, I agree with you on Khalil Mack. I think depending on what side Von Miller lines up on, I know he's going to get double teamed a lot, especially with a chip block from a running back. But I think what they need to do is unleash Montgomery, screens coming from over his head, run the opposite way, just let David Montgomery have at it. They didn't do that enough against Green Bay, and there's a reason why the Bears and Pittsburgh are the only teams that didn't score a touchdown in Week 1. But I do expect this to be, a close defensive game. Give me 16-13 Bears.
Oh, yeah. So we're right there. We're right there.
Right, and the thing is, the other talk is, and I'm seriously going to strangle some Chicago sports radio talkers, but the other thing is, Matt Nagy didn't let Pinheiro attempt a 51-yard field goal. Pinheiro is going to hit 3 field goals in this game, and one of them is going to be beyond 51 yards because they're in the Mile High City and the ball travels further. I'm not saying he's going to set a record. I'll never say that. But I'm saying that he's going to hit a long field goal that's more than 51 yards. He's going to silence his critics for another week.
It's 10-3. Your field goal is not going to win you the game. And I know when they wanted to kick the field goal, it was 3-0.
I know. That would have made it 7-6. Green Bay kicked the field goal to make it 10-6. And, the Bears could have kicked a field goal late in the fourth quarter, and they could have stopped Rodgers to get another field goal try to go up 12-10. But if he misses, man, they never would have heard the end of it. Listen, I'm really glad that the Bears brought in a bunch of guys to try out. They did trade for a guy, but it was like a 7th-round pick, I'm like, okay, trade for him. But what I'm glad they didn't do is pull a Minnesota and trade for Kari Vedvik, who was on the Ravens kicking all these field goals in preseason. Couldn't kick a lick in Minnesota. They get rid of him, re-sign Blair Walsh, or Dan Bailey, sorry, Blair Walsh. Dan Bailey, he's got the kicking job now. And then Vedvik signed with the Jets, who misses an extra point. Granted, the Jets lose by 1, so that came into effect. They cut him, brought in somebody else. I think it was Cairo Santos. So it's not that just the Bears with kicking problems.
No, it's a league-wide.
Twice as much because of the double doink.
It's a league-wide issue.
And that Nagy let go of a 43-yard field goal. Dude, let it go. It was last year. You need to move on and let your field goal kicker freaking try some field goals.
Right. I agree.
Because right now he's the only one scoring, not your offense.
Well, and as I tell people, take the points when you can get them, man, especially in the first half, because it always comes back and haunts you.
Absolutely.
Look, let's jump gears here a little bit to a game that I know everyone's excited to talk about. I'm actually surprised this wasn't picked as the Monday night game, considering I very easily could see one of the Ram games, like Rams-Browns. That doesn't need to be prime time. Make the Rams-Saints prime time. Come on. But the Rams-Saints game, I've heard a lot of people talking that the Saints, this is a revenge game for the Saints. If you don't think that this is a revenge game for the Rams, you're either stupid, delusional, or you've been eating way too much damn gumbo in your lifetime. All right? The Rams are the only team that I can recall in all the years I've been watching football since 1985 to have won a championship game and their opponent got more airtime all the way up to and into the Super Bowl. I can never recall that happening any other time in history. Ever. So there are a lot of Ram fans that are looking at that going, we didn't get the full Super Bowl experience. We're being ignored for the fact that, yes, the call was blown, but we still had to drive the length of the field and kick the game-tying field goal from 57 yards out. We lost the coin toss. The Saints got the ball to start the overtime. We not only stopped them, we forced a turnover, then converted a really crucial third down thanks to our outstanding quarterback, and then won the game on Legatron's field goal. Like, they're getting no credit for anything that happened after the penalty. So again, I think the Rams are pumped up, they're amped up, and this is a rivalry, folks. Welcome, because this is San Francisco, Dallas, circa 1983. After the championship game in 81, the two championship game losses in 70 and 71, 83, the Niners beat the pants off of the Dallas Cowboys, essentially knocking them out of the division race. And people said at that moment, the Dallas Cowboys San Francisco 49er rivalry really began. Well, when Nickel Roby-Coleman knocked the living dog crap out of that wide receiver, I don't even remember the wide receiver he hit for the Saints, that officially knocked off whatever rivalry was going on in the NFC at that time and put the Rams and Saints on a collision course to be the next great NFC rivalry. They're former division foes, so there's a lot of history between the two teams. 1986, the Rams lost a game in New Orleans 6-0 after beating the defending world champs in Chi-Town on Monday night 20-17. There's a rivalry here. Flipper Anderson still has the NFL record for most receiving yards at 336 yards on a Sunday night game. Thanks the Sunday after Thanksgiving, the weekend of Thanksgiving, 20-17 overtime Ram victory over New Orleans. There's history here. There's a rivalry here, and it's taken root. So I can't wait to watch this game. I think it's going to be back and forth. I think it's going to be close. I think the Saints are going to get pressure on Goff and rattle him early. I think the Saints might even come out with a 10. Hell, I'll go as far as say they're going to jump out 17-0 on the Rams. Okay? But I think the Rams defense is going to buckle down. I think they're going to shut it down. And I think they're going to start that little comeback again. And I think they're going to start to feel their oats. They're going to find Cooper Kupp. I think Todd Gurley's going to find some running room. I think they're going to make some adjustments. And I think they're going to end up forcing, just because I really see it going this way. I think the Rams kick a game-tying field goal at the end of regulation to force overtime at 2020. And I think the Rams win the toss. I think they go up the field, they score a touchdown, and they win this thing 26-20 over New Orleans in overtime. I think it's going to be a great game. It could very well be 33. It could very easily be 32-27 with a touchdown in overtime because New Orleans gets 10 points in the second half. But I think there's going to be mad adjustments. I think there's going to be mad changes. I think there's going to be mad lead changes. I think there's going to be a big lead for each team at some point. I could see the Rams being up 27-17 and the Saints coming roaring back to tie it and force overtime. Or it's 20-20, or it's, they go 27-20 after the Rams jump out to a 20-17 lead and they tie. I mean, this is going to be a great game. It's going to be a great game. But at the end of the day, the Rams have beaten the Saints 2 out of the last 3 times they played them. In LA in 2018, in New Orleans in the NFC Championship game, right? And then they lost to them in New Orleans last year in the regular season. So 2 out of the last 3 times these two teams have played, they've won. Jared Goff is 2-2 all time against Sean Payton. And I remind people that 2 of his best performances in his career happened against New Orleans in New Orleans. 2017, he had his best performance of his rookie year in New Orleans against Drew Brees and the Saints. Last year's championship game was the best I've seen Jared Goff play all year long. The Rams are going to win this game because the Rams know they can't lose this game because they'll never hear the end of the championship game garbage if they lose. And they want to put that to bed permanently. And the crybabies are going to lose this thing in LA. Your call.
Okay. 2 days ago, Aqib Talib said about the way the NFC Championship game continues to sting the Saints. That's a New Orleans problem. Quoted, then tweeted by Trey Wingo. I so want Sean Payton to challenge a non-PI call on the Rams' first pass play of the game. To which I responded, go ahead. He'll lose a challenge. Tell him to, wait for it, run the ball. Then they wouldn't have had the non-PI call. Listen, I know that you want it to play out the way you want it, and for your sake, I hope it plays out to where it's tied at the end of regulation, and then Zerline kicks a game-winning field goal. I really do, because unfortunately I don't get the game on out here because the Bears and Broncos are playing, but I'm gonna try to find a way to watch it because I think it should be a great game. But I'm actually calling it because the New Orleans Saints play a different game outside of the Superdome in New Orleans. And the Saints are very beatable when they leave the state of Louisiana. Now, they have one wide receiver to guard. You have 3 wide receivers to guard. You have one running back. We still don't know about his knee, and I know you said put to bed all questions about his knee earlier in the segment. Or earlier in the show. And right now, I think Kamara is the better running back of the two. And I do believe Drew Brees is still a really good quarterback. And Jared Goff is still coming into his own. With that being said, man, it's going to be Fireworks City in Los Angeles over the Coliseum on Sunday afternoon at the Coliseum. Like, they hadn't seen fireworks there since Carson Palmer and Reggie Bush or Matt Leinart.
Yeah.
Any of those USC greats when they play college football. They're going to see football that they haven't seen out of the Rams in over a year. Okay, because obviously the Super Bowl salt is still salty, and you want to take that saltiness taste out of your mouth. Whoop up on the Saints, and that's exactly what they're going to do. 37-20. The Rams will score at will on that Saints defense. Goff's going to throw for over 300. 2 touchdowns to Kupp, 1 to Cooks, and don't be surprised if Malcolm Brown gets in the end zone again, or if it's Gurley because he's like, damn, give me the damn ball.
Yep.
And Saints is going to be pressured all day up the middle, and that's where he really hates being pressured, is straight up the gut. And guess who's there? Aaron Donald.
You got it. All right, man.
So congratulations on a big win. I don't think it's going to be close. I think the Rams will win big, and then Saints fans can go stop crying about everything else.
Exactly. Quit your lawsuits. Quit your crying. All right, guys, that's it. That's a wrap. Hope you guys enjoy the show. I'm Anthony.
I'm Eric.
Horns up.
Bear down.
Go Rams.
Go Bears.
See you guys later.